This is Meredith Stowers with Cross Country Mortgage and the ADU Coalition. Exciting news talking to Denis DeSaix of the Appraisal Institute. He also runs MetroCal Appraisal. Denis, tell us what's up on the new ADU guidelines for appraisers.
Well, the ADU guidelines for appraisers from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and I can say FHA, are coming more and more into alignment. The significant change that has happened is twofold. One, it's the way that they allow appraisers to use comparable data to support the fact that an ADU is marketable. Let me take a step back and explain that a little bit. So old rule was that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac would require two comparables with ADUs, and a comparable is a sale that we use in our sales comparison analysis in order to accept the fact that an ADU was marketable in that particular neighborhood, and therefore we can value it and analyze it for its value. Sometimes that created restrictions because in some neighborhoods there weren't a lot of transactions that had ADUs. So if you couldn't find one, that was a real big barrier. Because ADU regulations have become more flexible, we have a booming development of ADUs going on in many markets. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac recognize this change, and therefore they've changed the requirements for their guidelines. No longer do we need two comparable sales with ADUs. What they require now is, okay, if you have one or two, that's great. But if you don't have one or two, what we're really concerned about is this ADU in this neighborhood? Are there other properties like that? We just want to feel good about the fact that if we're going to be loaning on a property with an ADU, it's not the albatross, it's not the one of a kind. That ADUs are typical and transactions occur. So what they allow us now to do is, rather than find a comparable, and the definition of a comparable is a good substitute for the property that we're appraising, we can use sales that we would normally not consider as comparables. For example, I have an 1,800 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single-story house, and it has a 800 square foot ADU. If I'm appraising just the house, there's no way I would ever consider using a 3,500 square foot, 6-bedroom, 4-bath house as a comparable, as a comparable. But I can now cite that sale, if it has an ADU, as evidence that in this market we do have homes with ADUs. And that's a big change, because we're not locked in anymore to, oh, I got to find this sale, it's got to be 6 months and it's got to be comparable to my subject. No. Are there sales in the neighborhood? They don't have to be comparable. So give us one sale and give us one pending, and you're good to go. We will accept the fact that the neighborhoods, they do have ADUs, they are transacted, people are buying them. That is a challenge that no longer exists for appraisers. So that's really good news. The other thing that I think Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have done exceptionally well now is that they've defined to a high degree exactly what they count as an ADU. And that's really relevant for us in California, because we have kind of two different types of ADUs here. We have an ADU accessory dwelling unit, which everybody kind of thinks, yes, this is what we used to call the in-law unit or the granny unit. Has a bedroom or a sleeping area, it has a kitchen, has a bath. In California, we have something else that's called a JADU, a junior ADU. It can have all the features of an ADU, but it can also be built in a manner where it doesn't have its own bathroom or sanitary facility. Why is that important? Well, as of now, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, they will not loan on properties with 2 ADUs. So as an appraiser, if I go out to a property and I have a detached ADU, and I have this other thing called a JADU. Most likely we'd see it as a garage conversion. I might say, well, gee, there's two ADUs here. It doesn't count. Fannie Mae won't loan on it. I can't appraise the property. Fannie Mae has defined what an ADU is for the lending purposes, and that's really important for everybody to understand. There's ADU permits and how the jurisdiction approves the construction of an ADU. They have their definition. Lenders have their own definition of an ADU. And the significant defining factor is there has to be privacy, the expectation of privacy. You have to have a bathroom, a sanitary facility. You have to have a kitchen. You have to have a place to sleep. Doesn't have to be a bedroom. We can have studios as ADUs and JADUs. But for the JADU, I can put one in my garage conversion, but I don't have to have a bathroom. The junior ADU can share the bath facility of the primary house. Okay, again, why is this really important? Well, I can have a JADU with no bathroom in that conversion, and I can have a detached ADU that fits the traditional definition that we would all think of. If that's the configuration, that's not two ADUs as far as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are concerned. That's a loanable product for their loan programs. And it's very important for appraisers and anybody, any stakeholders of ADU development or ownership to understand that right now they won't loan if they're two ADUs as they define them. But an ADU and a junior ADU without that bathroom, that doesn't meet their definition. So we can appraise, we can loan on that.
So if you have a JADU and an ADU, the appraiser would treat the JADU as part of the gross square footage of the primary house?
That could be the best way to treat it. And in many situations, it would be the way to treat it. And I should be careful when I say that, because there are a lot of nuances in how we value space. So typically an appraiser will consider the house as the primary living area, and we call that GLA for gross living area, and we would measure that. Now, what about in the situation where we've converted the garage, we finished it off the same as the living area inside? It was done under a JADU permit, not an addition, but a JADU permit, and it doesn't have that bathroom. What should an appraiser do in that situation? An appraiser probably has two ways that it can go, he or she can go. We could say, hey, here's the conversion permit. This is not an ADU as defined by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It acts as living area, and we're going to include it in the gross living area. That's one way. The other way is they could say, this is a garage conversion. It functions as living area. I'm going to treat it as a separate space, but the value in the market is probably the same as the living area. So the important thing for the appraisers to understand is what these definitions are, how to communicate that in the report. This is what exists. This is what I have. This is what it is. This is what it isn't. And then this is how I'm going to value it. So those are the critical pieces for an appraiser when they're walking into that ADU, JADU situation.
Mm-hmm. I'm also very excited, and I'll share my screen again. They've also added whether a property is defined as a 1-unit property with an ADU or a 2 to 4 unit property will be based on the characteristics of the property, which may include but are not limited to, and this is new, the existence of separate utility meters. They're now allowing that. There was some question. A unique postal address, and whether it can be legally rented. How does the rental income now factor into that appraisal?
Yeah, we're sticking with the ADUs, and that passage, we could find that passage when in Fannie Mae's guidelines when they talked about 2 to 4s. So Fannie Mae has never
Mhm.
said that, utilities or mailing addresses will define whether you got 2 units or 1 unit or this or that. What they have done is they've incorporated that now into the ADU definition to make it more clear. And that's what I was saying. They've done a really good job of saying, this is what we mean by an ADU. As of now, for
So
income,
go ahead. Go ahead.
as of now for income, their standard lending programs do not count the income that an ADU generates as part of the income qualification for the borrower. What does that mean? Does that mean that income's not related to value as far as the appraisers are concerned? No, income is, if you have a rental, a viable rental, the market will pay money to get that income. So it is a consideration that we can take into our analysis. Where I've seen some friction though is between the communication of the appraisers and the lenders, because sometimes the lenders will tell me, well, we don't count the income, so we don't want to see anything about income or income approach. And what I've been trying to communicate back to them is, no, I hear what you're saying. I understand that you can't count the income, so you might not be interested in a rent survey for this. What I'm saying is that the value, the contributory value that the ADU has can be related to income. And there are income analyses that we can use to help support that value. That's really the big tug of war, is how do you support the value of an ADU, especially in markets where there's just not a lot of transactions to clearly show it's worth this much. And all these techniques.
Let me ask.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me ask you this. So if there's not a lot of ADUs in the area, but there's fantastic rental income on this potential ADU, and in fact, maybe they even have a rental agreement for the future, whatever. Could the appraiser treat that ADU like a duplex in terms of the marketability for the rental income?
Not easily. Not easily.
Okay.
And there's a very good reason why. And I'll try to explain it. Not that it's complicated, but because maybe my explanation might not be as simple as it should be. So if I have a duplex, what I'm appraising is 2 units, and those 2 units are supported by the land. So a duplex is designed to be built on a 2-unit site, and the value of those units, of that income, reflects both the improvements, the physical unit, and the underlying value of the land. Okay. But if I have a single family home with an ADU, the land component has already been valued in the single family home. Let's say that single family homes are worth $750,000. So I have this house here, doesn't have an ADU, but what's it worth? $750,000. I put an ADU on it. How much value does that ADU contribute? If I tried to use the income techniques that I use for a duplex, I would be valuing the ADU as if it also had land value. It doesn't. The house at $750,000 includes the value of the land and the value of the house. We need to figure out a way to extract that land value out and just use the income to value the physical improvement, the building. That's easier said than done. And it's not a typical technique that we residential appraisers use. And we're working on trying to develop a relatively simple, straightforward, and very clear way of doing that, so everybody can agree, yeah, oh, I get it. We can rent this ADU for $1,500 a month, $1,800 a year. And therefore, these things trade at 10 times their annual income. That is the holy grail that we're trying to develop right now, to come up with the easy way, the simple way, but an accurate way to do this. That's not overly complicated for residential appraising.
And that makes sense to me, because if adding on an ADU, let's say you are adding on that example, $750,000 home, you're adding a $200,000 ADU, that extra cost on your mortgage is $900 per month, but your rental income is easily going to be $2,000 a month. So you have, an over 100% return on investment month over month. It's a no-brainer of an investment. To me, pure cash flow. So is that something that the appraiser should be taking into consideration? Not just the fact that it costs $200, so the construction value, but also the fact that it's generating market income.
Yeah, it is something that should be discussed and should be included in the analysis. If all ADUs were purchased as income producing units, then we would have an extremely strong argument to say we can skip everything else and just analyze the income. But that's not what happens. I think the latest survey that I saw put out by Berkeley said 51% of the ADUs were rented based on the survey from the people that answered their survey. So let's just say that 40 to 60% of all ADUs now are rented. If that's the case, then there's 40 to 60% that are owner occupied, and maybe the income approach doesn't capture the entire dynamic of what somebody would pay for that unit in the market.
Except that, let's say, a family's using it, grandma lives in the ADU, adult kids live in the house. They sell it to somebody who does intend to rent out the ADU instead. So then the marketability factor still comes into play in terms of its ultimate value. So wouldn't rental comps come in no matter how it's going to be used?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that income should be looked at. And I know that when I appraise ADUs myself and in the courses that I teach, I make it a point, you should always find out what the rents are. Even if they're not intending to rent it, you should find out what the rents are for these types of units, because that is data that can be used to support whatever analysis that you are using and support the value that you conclude to. But I would say that in some markets, let me put it to you this way, in some markets, there is a high degree of homes that are being rented, single family homes. So in those markets, the income approach works and makes a lot of sense. It's a little different because we're considering the land in those. So we can compare rental houses to rental houses. And the income approach is pretty consistent. But in areas where it's not predominantly rental properties, that you have owner users and investors buying the properties, then the income approach becomes less accurate. It still can assist in pointing us to a good market value, but 100% reliance on it, because the mix is in all investors, it becomes less reliable for that. So I don't want to discount income analysis. That is definitely, as I said, the holy grail that we're trying to refine that we can use. It's very important. And I think the market, look, if you're an investor, that's what you're thinking about. Most people that I speak to, when I go to their homes and I say, what motivated your decision here? And it's usually kind of on a spectrum. Recently, most have said, you know what? I didn't want to go into the office under these conditions. So we've been thinking about this. I'm going to build this, and this is going to be my on-site office for a while. When my kids get a little older and they're going off to college, they're probably going to come back for a while. If they do, this is where they're going to stay. I don't want them in the house, but I want them close. We'll put them in the ADU. And then eventually, I've heard, if we get to the age where maybe we need a little assistance, we can make the decision whether, you know, do we live in the house and maybe bring a caregiver in here to have full time? That's what I had to do with my mom, but I didn't have the benefit of building an ADU. So the people that I'm talking to are looking at an ADU as part of a long-term plan. Part of that plan is renting.
Agreed. Agreed. What, Dennis, when you evaluate ADUs, what is a typical valuation you see in terms of relative to the cost of building? Again, let's go back to that $200,000 example. What's the relative value that you typically see? Is it 0%? Is it 75%? Is it 110%? Where are you seeing it come around?
Yeah, so what I see is in most cases, the value of many cases, the value of the ADU is closely correlated to the value of the primary unit. Now, again, we got to understand that the primary unit, that's not taking the sales price and divided that into that, the size of the house, because that sales price has all kinds of things, including the land. So in appraising, we might make adjustments for sizes of living area difference, anywhere on the order from maybe $125 to $200, $250 a square foot. Some areas, markets, it's higher, $300, $400. What I see many times is the value of the ADU is highly correlated to the value that somebody would give as additional living area. And I think that is how the modern home buyer is looking at this space. Before, a patio was a patio. Now it's outdoor living space, and it's being used as outdoor living space. Before, you know, a detached bonus room was, oh, that's something else. Families are utilizing that space, especially in California. We are space constrained. So any opportunity we have to create space that has living utility for it, that becomes valuable. And I think that's probably the next barrier that the appraisal process has to kind of break through, is this idea that, well, here's the house and this is the only space that's living area, and all this other stuff, you really can't count that as being the same. It's not how the market is working anymore. So that's what I see, mostly correlated to the same value that somebody would pay for additional living area, because that's how they use it.
Perfect. Thank you, Denis DeSaix of the Appraisal Institute, owner of MetroCal Appraisal, bleeding edge of ADU appraisals and reworking that process. Thank you, Denis.
Thank you.